That's very kind of you.
Um, Rabbi, I should look up how many papers I've written now just to see the range of everything. But um,
Yeah, and also you can tell me how consistent I've been with this paper class.
I would say that we're more trimesters than quarterly, um,
Oh,
realistically. But
okay. Something
uh,
to keep working towards.
it's good. It's good to have goals. Um,
Exactly.
and just before I start, but I think a lot of my papers have been on halacha, which is great. But like, it's good to have like a chance to. I wrote more of a reflection, just to kind of some stuff I've been processing. Um, so this past weekend, my family was in town for the Easter holiday. Um, my parents and siblings went to church services, and I went on a long run with a close friend whom I met through our shul community. I'd recently trained for my first half marathon and decided it was easier to stay in shape than not to be. As an aside, while training for the big running event with my in-laws this year, I kept the mitzvah of "and you shall guard yourself well" close. Long runs in the dark winter was an expression of my closeness with Hashem, I guess. I digress. After my run and my family services, we met for a meal. The conversation settled on for a while my life as an Orthodox Jew. We talked through the concept of Shabbat observant, based in biblical halacha, and how it's expressed by the restrictions from using electricity and cooking, kind of walking through a mini Jewish Law 101 lesson, how you go from biblical commandments to rabbinic and so forth. During the discussion, my sister's partner asked me the question, so what's been the hardest thing to give up? I paused. Was it fasting for more days a year than ever before? Was it not eating chametz during Pesach? Or my constant struggle to learn to read a new language with a math, science, and logic brain? Clearly, many of these are challenging or a struggle, but were they the hardest? For the long-winded answers that I had thoroughly explained about Jewish law, I didn't have an answer. It's been a change with many wonderful elements I explained. For example, I catch myself on Wednesday and Thursday thinking to myself that Shabbat cannot come soon enough. The positive pressure to set aside time for rest, reading, and reflection is a welcome change. Certainly I'm challenged to explain to family, friends, and coworkers why I'm not available, but I love the time set aside for rest each week. In reflection, I've been lucky to be surrounded by supportive family, an open and welcoming community, and a great study group every week through this process that the struggles have been manageable. So, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Great. And potentially your last paper for the class?
That's right. Time for reflection.
Mm-hmm. Who wants to go next?
I can go.
Go for it.
All right. I wrote my paper called Exploring the Kippah. What is the most noticeable difference between a Jew and a non-Jew? No, we're not talking about physical stereotypes. If one had to make a single distinction between a Jewish man and a non-Jewish man, or better yet, the distinction between an observant Jewish man and a non-observant Jewish man, are we closer? The kippah. The kippah, or yarmulke in Yiddish, is the skull cap worn by observant Jewish men as a sign of respect for Hashem, our Creator, that is present everywhere and in everything, especially above our heads, both literally and figuratively. Jewish law requires men to adhere to this practice, which is specifically referenced in the Talmud. The Talmud states, "Cover your head in order that the fear of heaven may be upon you," which has traditionally been interpreted as a directive towards wearing a kippah, as a sign of constant awareness of Hashem. As someone who more recently started sporting the kippah as a part of my daily routine, I wanted to explore the practice and learn more about the different interpretations of this custom across Judaism. The custom of wearing a kippah not only varies by denomination, but also by geography. Most observant Orthodox Jews wear a kippah at all times. This is not just considered a responsibility of adult men, but male children as well. The conservative movement generally believes that Jewish men should cover their head when in shul, during prayer or study, during a ritual act, or when eating. The Reform movement generally believes that kippah should be worn during shul only, but many also believe that it should not be an obligation at all. Interestingly enough, the root of this argument within the Reform community was a known reformer, Rabbi Isaac Wise's kippah was unceremoniously knocked off his head. It's also interesting.
Can you go back to what you broke up there?
Oh, you can't hear me?
Just that last.
Okay. I said, interestingly enough, the root of this argument within the Reform community supposedly dates back to an instance when known reformer Rabbi Isaac Wise's kippah was unceremoniously knocked off his head. It's also interesting to note that Ashkenazic Jews tend to wear the kippah more often than Sephardic Jews. As someone who grew up going to all three congregations in my community, Reform Temple, a conservative synagogue, and a Chabad, I was exposed to a wide variety of kippot in terms of make and model. I was curious to find out if there was a link between the different styles and groups, and sure enough, there is. Let's start with the crocheted kippot made out of cloth. These are generally associated with the religious Zionists, modern Orthodox, and conservative Masorti Jewish movements. Suede kippot are often found in modern Orthodox, conservative, Reform, and yeshivish, when black, settings. The terylene and black velvet kippot are popular among Hasidic, Haredi, and Lubavitch communities, especially rabbis in yeshivas and seminaries. Satin kippot tend to be found in conservative and Reform communities. And if you've ever been to Jerusalem, you may have noticed men wearing a full head-size crocheted kippah, sometimes with a tassel or palm on the top. This is popular with the Nanach subgroup of Breslov Hasidism. Sephardim have their own variation of kippah with the Bucharan, which is tall, almost box-like kippah, which is also popular with children and even liberal-leaning feminist Reform Jews. And finally, Yemenite Jews specifically wear stiff black velvet kippot that are embroidered around the edges. A popular and contemporary means in adhering to this custom while simultaneously blending into secular society is to wear a hat in place of a kippah. We often see observant Jews wearing hats while in public settings, but sporting kippot in shul or more private settings. I was looking to find a general consensus here, but in my research, I didn't find much information on which is more appropriate and under what circumstances. Having been to a number of modern Orthodox shuls at this point, I've seen many men, specifically older men, sporting hats during prayer. This begs the question, what makes a kippah a kippah? If the general idea is to cover one's head at all times, what makes wearing a traditional kippah different from wearing a baseball cap? I believe this is really up to individual interpretation, as the Talmud doesn't really discuss whether wearing your 2009 Yankees World Series hat is appropriate in shul. In my personal opinion, I think since covering one's head is the primary objective, it shouldn't matter what size or shape the covering is. However, I also believe that it's important to be sensitive to different customs of each shul or congregation. So if it's customary to wear the traditional kippah in a particular shul, it's probably best to follow suit. One final area that I looked into was the varying interpretations of whether non-Jews or women should wear kippot. Growing up, it was always customary for anyone entering a temple or synagogue to put on a kippah, regardless of their own faith, as a sign of respect. I found that most congregations believe it's both a sign of respect for the Jewish congregation as well as a sign for the non-Jews themselves. Although there's no real reason, halachically, for a non-Jew to wear a kippah, I appreciate this logic as it's more important to be inclusive. Regarding women, it's definitely a more secular custom for women to wear kippot. The difference of opinion stems from the underlying belief in Orthodox Judaism that women are not obligated to follow the same commandments or customs as men when it comes to ritual clothing. Since women don't typically wear talis or lay tefillin, the tradition of wearing a kippah is often looped into the same line of thinking. In many Orthodox communities, married women do cover their hair, but it is actually unrelated to the custom of wearing a kippah. Today, this topic is still widely debated as it as it is related to a larger argument over the overall positioning of women within Judaism. In sum, there exists a wide variety of opinions about the time, place, responsibility, and even the material in which it is made. But to most Jews, the kippah represents the everlasting bond with Hashem. And no matter what group one belongs to, for the most part, there exists a time to cover our heads to acknowledge a greater force other than ourselves.
Thank you. Excellent. Thorough. You can tell so much. If you wanna peg somebody, just their kippah is a dead giveaway, and it is right more often than not. It's insane, and it really even breaks down even beyond that. Like, you can tell that somebody wears a clip or does not wear a clip with their hair, or what color it might be.
And I apologize, my paper ran a little bit over, but I could have gone into a lot of other areas, but in the interest of time, I didn't. Maybe chapter.
No apologies for going over. It's a one-page minimum. We don't offer maximums.
Oh, okay.
One-page minimum. Thank you, Eitan. Who's up next?
I can go.
Just go for it.
All right, I'll go. It's Dan.
Okay, and after Dan goes, I want us to sort of process if this group is what the dynamics of our group in which the men feel comfortable jumping in and women have not yet. So let's just keep that in the back of our minds, and as if we are not creating a safe space for women to feel comfortable. Okay, please go, Dan.
All right, so as a lawyer, I like following current events. So I wrote about the Sanhedrin. So here it goes. The Sanhedrin was the ancient Jewish court system that began in approximately 57 BCE and lasted until approximately 425 CE, with the court of last resort being the Great Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin lasted 483 years. For comparison, the Supreme Court of the United States is only 227 years old. The Great Sanhedrin was composed of 71 sages, all who were male, who would meet during daytime hours on all days except Shabbat and holidays. They would meet in the hewn stones in the Temple of Jerusalem. Once the Great Sanhedrin ruled, the ruling was final, and anyone who did not act in accordance with the ruling was put to death. The Great Sanhedrin was led by...
I'm just kidding. Keep going, Dan.
The Great Sanhedrin was led by a Nasi, who was the president, and his deputy was the Ab Bet Din, also the vice president. The remaining 69 sages sat in a semicircle very similar to how the Supreme Court sits today. The primary function of the Sanhedrin was to solve disputes. Disputes may have arisen as criminal or civil disputes, and the Sanhedrin dealt with matters ranging from religion, rituals, criminal proceedings, adultery, and other matters relating to Jewish life. Similarly, the Supreme Court deals with matters traversing most elements of life, including religious freedoms, civil matters, criminal procedure matters, and others. The Great Sanhedrin had additional powers that the lower Sanhedrin did not. For example, one of these was trying the king and extending the boundaries of Jerusalem. A little known fact about the Supreme Court is that it has original jurisdiction to hear arguments between states and cases involving public ministers also including the President of the United States. The Sanhedrin judges were well versed in law, philosophy, business, mathematics, science, and even witchcraft. The reason for being well versed in topics that Jewish law generally prohibited the belief was that they could fairly and appropriately judge the accused. Very much like the Supreme Court justices are well versed and become well versed in various topics upon which they judge. Although the United States may not have been founded on the Supreme Court exclusively on the principles of the Sanhedrin, there is no denying that the United States Supreme Court has uncanny parallels to the Great Sanhedrin, and the federal court system is akin to the Sanhedrin. Although many people do not think of it as such, Jewish culture and tradition play a large role in everyday American life. Some of the most important decisions that affect our lives come from Supreme Court decisions. Think about how our life might be different if the United States did not borrow from the principles of the Jewish court system. In my research, I have not found whether or not the Sanhedrin followed the principles of stare decisis, which is setting precedent, but the technical similarities are uncanny and cannot simply be ignored. The larger implication is that all court systems established in the same manner as the court system of the United States is a borrowed concept of the Jewish court system of the Sanhedrin. I don't think most people understand the power that only 9 U.S. citizens have over the entire population. The Supreme Court receives nearly 8,000 requests per year for cases to be heard, and they grant approximately 80 of them. That's 1%. Everyday American life and culture has been molded by a system put in place hundreds of years ago by the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm. That's inspiring. Mr. Koa. I'm glad you took something that you're an expert on and sort of delved in. I was waiting for the current events, but then, Merrick Garland, so then I connected the dots. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
Okay, who's up next?
Oh, I can go. Is that okay?
Oh. Anyone who jumps in?
Okay. Sorry, I'm just... Oh, okay. So for those of you who've been in the class for a few months, last paper day, you may remember we debated Hamantashen versus Lapka. I was team Hamantashen, purely on the basis of taste and my weakness for shortbread anything. And it wasn't until Purim this year that I began to learn the vast symbolism behind this tasty treat. And interestingly, I began to hear many variations of the significance, and so for this paper I decided to try to uncover the real story. So first let's talk about pockets. Hamantashen roots from the German poppy seed pastry Mantasch. Mantasch comes from the German words Mann for poppy seed and Tasch for pocket. And around the late 1500s, German Jews dubbed these Hamantaschen or Haman's pockets. The play on the words likely references the rumor that evil Haman's pockets were filled with bribe money. And the analogy works particularly well because Man sounds quite a bit like Haman. So that's the pockets analogy. Second is ears. In Israel, Hamantashen came to be known as Oznei Haman, quite literally Haman's ears. The name stems from the myth that the pastries celebrate cutting off Haman's ears before he was hanged. But there seems to be no historic documentation of such mutilation. I have found that the idea stems from a midrash that describes Haman bent over and shamed with Oznaim Mekut Afot. Yeah. And this phrase seems to have been misinterpreted to mean clipped or cut off ears. However, twisted ears is really a more accurate interpretation. And finally, the hat. The last interpretation is that Hamantashen symbolizes Haman's tri-cornered hat. Three-cornered hats were not actually in fashion in biblical times, so it's unlikely he ever wore one. It's more likely that over the centuries, as tri-cornered hats came in style, an association between the three-cornered pastry and an alleged hat was born. I would offer a guess that the hat analogy has stayed relevant because it's more kid-friendly than bribe money or mutilation. No matter which symbolic object you prefer, eating Hamantashen can be interpreted as destroying Haman's memory. I've also read that the three corners can represent the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, from whom Esther derived strength. And covering or partially covering the filling with dough can be likened to God's role being hidden in the Purim story. And finally, the poppy seeds also have their own symbolism. First, Esther kept her Jewish identity a secret while living in the king's palace. The Talmud explains that since the food was unkosher, she survived only on beans and seeds. And then last, this one's a little bit more out there, but I've heard that we should eat food made out of seeds on Purim in memory of the seeds that Daniel and his friends ate in the house of the king of Babylon. As the verse states, and he gave them seeds. You're probably wondering why Daniel. Daniel, as in the book of Daniel, was another Jewish hero to depict an existential threat to the Jewish people. But in his story, Daniel commands the Jews to wait faithfully for God to resolve the crisis. Well, the Talmud explains that Hathach, Queen Esther's faithful messenger, one of the lesser-known characters, but still important, is actually a pseudonym for Daniel. So long story short, we eat seeds on Purim in his honor as well as Esther's. So in conclusion, whether you support the pocket, the ears, or the hat, or all of the above, hopefully I've given you some food for thought, and perhaps you will think twice before choosing the latke over the epically symbolic Hamantaschen.
Does Emily have a retort?
What?
What was that?
Does Emily have a retort?
Oh, I'm on team Hamantaschen too.
Thank you, Jackie.
I can go next if no one else was.
Already have the mic.
Okay, great. Just because my internet was hit or miss, so now that it's working, I want to make sure to get it done. All right. So the title of my paper is Yiddish: The Hole in Your Neshama That You Never Knew Existed. Ich will, as ihr alle soll kennen Yiddish. I would not be here in this class today if I had not become verliebt or fallen in love with the Mama Lashon, aka Yiddish. Now, many of you are probably already overwhelmed with the amount of Jewish knowledge there is to know, and for some of you this might also include Hebrew. And to that no, Sizavitz, I'm just joking. I have nothing but derech eretz or respect for Lashon Kodesh, or the Holy Tongue, as we refer to it. We should definitely all be able to see what's going on. But unless you're planning on making Aliyah, I suggest embracing your Golis identities and learning Mama Lashon. Nu, farvos, why, might you ask? Why? You have the chutzpah to ask why. And to that I say, may your enemies have as many tzuras as there are excellent reasons to learn Yiddish. Reason number one. Language and culture are two halves of the same coin. I speak with authority on this, fellow Yidden and future Yidden. I dafka defended a doctoral dissertation in linguistic anthropology just to share this important message with you, that in order to preserve Yiddishkeit, we also need Yiddish. Every phrase, every word in Yiddish is saturated with Jewishness, which is why even the very word Yiddish means Jewish. To say, how are you, one can ask, Vos macht a Yid? How is a Jew? And what is the most Yiddish response? Answering with a question, Was soll ich machen? How should I be? Even seemingly mundane words, like the word for toilet paper, have a Yiddischen tam, or a flavor of Jewishness. The word for toilet paper is thus, be grateful that you have an indispensable commodity. Now, a disclaimer. I don't want to be ethnocentric here and act like the entire Jewish world is of Ashkenazi descent. I'm certainly not myself. In fact, I started with my entry into Judaism before the thought of converting to Judaism was ever even the remotest possibility in my horizon, with learning Ladino as an undergraduate in southern Spain. So if you're of Sephardi or Mizrahi descent and you have Judeo-Arabic, Juhro, Bukhari, or any other number of Jewish languages in your past, Mazel Tov, Chaver Meiner, and Gesundheit, go forth and seek the linguistic riches of those ancestors and learn Ladino. It is also a beautiful, rich language, worthy of your attention, and with an even fewer number of native speakers. But if you choose Yiddish, you are already most likely living in a city with the greatest number of Yiddish speakers in the world, New York. So you have multiple opportunities to practice if you want to take a trip to Williamsburg, Borough Park, or even Crown Heights, where most of my Yiddish-speaking friends live. Many of these communities manage to preserve their Jewish identities by employing Yiddish as a kind of mechitza between the religious and the secular, the Jewish and the non-Jewish worlds, which is why perhaps it's not surprising that English is often known in Yiddish by another name, Goyish. Now that you know that you can use the language and it's important, you might ask, but how is this possible? I know we don't all have the luxury of a Bubby or Zadie to schmooze with. Fortunately, there are a wealth of resources for learning the Sprach of your Haloimus, your dream language, Yiddish. And the most important, which is called Yiddish Pop. It's just www.yiddishpop.com. You can learn from a cartoon robot and his friend Nomi, and I highly recommend it. There's also Yiddish Farm, where you can learn how to farm at the same time as you speak only Yiddish. Evo, which has summer programs, and there's a Bichard Center, Massachusetts, of Yiddish books, so they're on the roof. Okay, now that you know how to learn Yiddish and a few reasons why, maybe you're still not convinced. But the best possible reason to learn Yiddish in true Yiddish fashion is really a question rather than an answer. Was nicht? Why not? Thank you.
You're too funny, Emily. It's great. Excellent. You do not have to learn Yiddish to make it through.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. So funny. You should send that paper out to Rabbi Ram before you skip.
Thanks. Will do.
Simply grease the wheels.
Yeah.
Who's up next?
I could go.
Please.
It's Jason from.
And from Oregon.
Marvi's not here, but I am. Yeah. How are you? So I wasn't exactly sure what the parameters of the paper were, but I thought I'd come up with something. So, in lieu of playing the stereotype here, remote Southern Oregon, I decided against the paper on the lost tribes of the Indian West and went with the halachic view of marijuana.
Go for it.
With 4 states, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, as well as the District of Columbia, legalizing recreational marijuana, 23 medical marijuana states, a pending referendum on its legalization set for this year in California, as well as a recent amendment to take marijuana off the Schedule 1 list, the halachic view on marijuana is timely. The Code of Jewish Law writes, also one will beautify Shabbat candle lighting when the wick is made from cotton, flax, or cannabis. According to Yosef Glassman, a Moel and geriatrician who studied its halachic roots and endorses its use on medical grounds, cannabis was used to make talitot, tzitzit, and schach. Cannabis was also one of the kitniyot, or forbidden category of foods that can't be eaten on Pesach. From this, one can assume that the cannabis plant was consumed at other points throughout the year. According to an article, did Aaron the high priest smoke? The biblical roots of Jews and marijuana. There are several biblical references to the herb, including the book of Numbers, where Aaron the high priest, no pun intended, probably burned marijuana as an incense offering during a time of turmoil. Other passages include God's instructions to Moses to take for yourself bisamim, herbs of medicinal quality, and instructions in Exodus to take spices of the finest sort, pure myrrh, 500 shekels, fragrant cinnamon, and kenna busim, which literally means sweet cane, but possibly refers to cannabis, end quote. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, in his book of Halacha, Igros Moshe, however, does not endorse its medicinal use under Pikuach Nefesh, nor does its legality play a role for Rabbi Feinstein. Excuse me, something just went off here. Play a role. Sorry about that. There's some. Just turn off the volume here. Seem like a stoner. Where was I? Nor does its legality play a role for Rabbi Feinstein under the concept of dinam de malchut dina, or the idea that the secular law of the land must be honored, with few exceptions for murder, illicit sexual relations, and idolatry. Feinstein writes, it is obviously forbidden to smoke marijuana, as this violates many basic laws of our Torah. First of all, it physically injures the person. Even if there are people who are not physically affected by this, it mentally affects a person as it destroys his mind and prevents him from understanding things properly, since not only can the individual not properly study Torah, he also cannot pray and properly perform mitzvot, since doing them mindlessly is considered as if they were not done at all. Additionally, the parents of the person smoking certainly are disturbed by his action, in which case he is violating the mitzvah of kibud av va'em, or respecting our parents. He is also violating the mitzvah of kedoshim tiyu, or be holy, as explained by Ramban in his commentary on the Chumash. This also leads him to transgress other prohibitions besides the actual prohibition of taking drugs. The bottom line is that this is one of the grave prohibitions, and everyone must try with all their strength to remove this impurity tuma from all the children of Israel. End quote. Sidestepping a comprehensive discussion of the medicinal effects of marijuana as a palliative for nausea, nerve damage, back pain, anxiety, and depression, the question remains on what grounds ought marijuana to be prohibited halachically. That Maimonides, as a 12th century physician, endorsed the use of cannabis oil for ailments such as colds and ear problems creates a precedent for new halachic responses. Should the medical and recreational use of marijuana be distinguished, for example? I ended sort of midstream, but...
Thank you.
Hello? Thank you.
Thank you, JR. Awesome. That was totally on.
I forget that I'm JR to you, Rabbi. So.
You're well within the parameters. Awesome.
So that's my paper.
Awesome. Very enlightening.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or?
Rabbi, can you hear us? We had trouble with our microphone.
I can hear you, Julia.
Okay, we switched computers.
Yeah, we had to switch computers.
Okay, well now we hear you well. But yeah, no, it's a very interesting question. Marijuana, smoking marijuana. I personally don't have any issues with it for medicinal purposes. The question is, and I certainly have no problem with it legally. If you ask halachically, so then it becomes another question in which certainly, smoking I have no tolerance for, as I've mentioned in the past, from a halachic perspective. But marijuana is a grayer area, and one has to be careful that their health is intact in the process as well. So, for a longer conversation, from my perspective, but awesome connection to the high priest, quote unquote, and other biblical approaches.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, who wants to go next? Julia, did you want to go next?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That's a working computer?
Yeah. I switched computers. That one wasn't working. Okay. So I decided to write my paper on organ transplants and the controversy regarding that, because I spoke a little bit to Rabbi about that. But so.
I have strong feelings, so I might have to wait till you finish, and then I'll comment as well.
Okay. So I wanted to touch on live organ transplants as well as organ donations after death. This topic is of interest to me because I myself have been interested in organ donations after death, and I knew that this was controversial in Judaism. So most of us are probably aware of the fact that there's a severe shortage of organs for transplantation throughout the world, including in the most scientifically advanced countries. While organ transplantation has offered a new life to those whose native organs have failed, this has raised a set of ethical questions with respect to the donor, recipient, and society at large. When looking at donors who are alive, issues of desecration of the dead body and prolonging the burial do not apply. Issues that do arise are whether the donor is allowed to wound him or herself to donate the organ, and whether the harvesting is acceptably safe. In most cases, the prohibition of wounding oneself may be overlooked by other considerations, such as medical necessity or saving the life of another. Modern rabbinic legal scholars have agreed that one may undergo a small risk to save someone else from certain danger or death. However, one may never obligate or coerce someone to donate an organ even to save the life of another. In addition, one may not significantly risk one's own health to save the life of another. So, for example, if one were to donate a kidney, this is permissible and appropriate, while not an obligation. Controversy still exists because some scholars express hesitation to allow live organ donation over concern that the risk may be too great to the donor. However, as the risk of complication becomes increasingly lowered, even those opinions may permit live donation. Interestingly, donation of bone and marrow are much easier to justify halachically because they are quickly renewable and very safe, presenting minimal risk to the donor. I have heard different opinions about donating organs, about being Orthodox and that you supposedly cannot be buried in an Orthodox cemetery, and have the tahara performed if you have donated organs. I have also recently learned that that is not necessarily true. According to the Halachic Organ Donor Society, you can be an Orthodox organ donor. It is important to understand that a brainstem dead patient is dead even though other organs can still be alive. Organs are usually taken from a person whose heart is still beating and was declared dead because the patient's brain has died. Some rabbis view a beating heart as a sign of life and prohibit removing organs, while other rabbis do not deem a beating heart sufficient for life and therefore allow donation. The Halachic Organ Donor Society offers a donor card where the person can choose to donate at brain death or cessation of heartbeat. The card confirms with halacha, such as stating minimum damage to the body and utmost respect during recovery process. Organs harvested from Jews can also be donated to anyone regardless of ethnic or religious background. So for those of us who are interested in organ donation, it is recommended to get the card from the Halachic Organ Donor Society, as opposed to just checking off the box on your license to ensure that all procedures are in accordance with halacha.
Yes, and this is what a card looks like. And then it has the back to see what kind you want. So if I can just buttress what you said excellently, Julia, in terms of for donation after life. So first of all, people, especially secular people, often think, oh, Orthodox Jews are not allowed to. You can't desecrate the body. Now, obviously, this argument is, it's true that we don't desecrate the body. Like, we don't do autopsies, for example, unless there's a real impending need that's right in front of us. However, when there's a life hanging in the balance, then this prohibition of desecrating the body falls away so quickly, because it will pale in comparison to saving the life of a human being. Now, the real issue around halachic organ donation is the time of death. So if you're allowed to take the organ, that's totally fine, but you can only take an organ, like the heart, of someone who's dead. So the real controversy arises about how do you determine the moment of death. Is the person dead when their brain is dead, or is the person dead when their heart is dead? And secondarily, if you do hold that brain death is death, well, what kind of brain death is real death, and what kind of brain death is not real death? Now, you might think this is a weird question to ask, but people throw out the term, doctors throw out the term brain death very casually to mean many things. And there really has to be a full cessation of the brain entirely. Now, this question is a brand new question. This did not exist 100 years ago. If the brain died, then the heart stopped moving because the brain couldn't tell the heart to beat. But now, with machinery, we can keep the heart beating artificially, even though the brain is 100%. It's as if the person is decapitated. You can have a decapitated person, and we can still have the brain beating. So that's one of the reasons why I strongly believe and support the brain death understanding, assuming the person is 100% dead in the brain. They have to be really dead, not just, there's like a vegetative state or minimal function. And the reason why this is important is because if a person is technically still alive, even if they're in a vegetative state, by taking out the heart, then the person is dying. So you end up killing that person for the organ, and that we cannot do. So even though there is a great need for organs, you can't kill another person to take out the organs. So the person has to be really dead. So it's a big mitzvah if a person has the opportunity after life to donate organs to someone to save a life of somebody else. And people should get this card. You should not do it on the driver's license because the driver's license will just say brain death, and doctors will not be careful to make sure that it's a real full-on brain death because they're very comfortable extubating and they have a very different understanding of permitting or quickening, hastening death of individuals that they feel they're at the end of life for quality of life issues, which is certainly counter to Jewish approach because we don't want to touch that slippery slope of we think this person is ready to die, we don't think this person is ready to die. It's a very big challenge when talking about the end of life issues. But let's bracket that a second, and that's enough of my little rant. Thank you, Emily, for encouraging me to go around a rant by your paper.
Julia. There's some law in the hospital system that they need to look for this card, or would a nurse or whoever looking through your wallet maybe just settle with your driver's license?
So my driver's license does not say anything about, does not have the heart symbol. And I would hope they would keep looking if I were to be alone. And the hope also would be that they would contact my loved ones. So, I mean, you're right. You know, they might not notice it first. They'd have to peer through my whole wallet to find it. But it's sort of the circumstance that we're in. I mean, you could also put them right next to each other, maybe put the license with this, so that whenever you see the license, you see this come up next, and it says organ donor card, and they're like, oh, what is this? Let me turn it around and read what this person permits. So, and this whole thing is free, by the way. You don't have to pay for this card. Halachic Organ Donation Society, HODS. Go get one. Who's up next? Thank you, Julia.
Can I keep going?
Sure.
All right. So, as Julia and I have gone on a Jewish journey, we have grown in many ways. We now keep kosher much better than we did before. We spend Shabbos together. We find holidays much more fun. Could always be better, but who isn't working on themselves in some way? Now, we have worked so diligently in many different aspects of Judaism.
Jared, I don't want to be your bar mitzvah teacher, but slow down.
Sorry. However, the one mitzvah that I have yet to be able to understand is the mitzvah of Amalek. And that is the question I have on this paper. How could we as a religion condone genocide? And how could the most persecuted religion of all time say that we should kill all of Amalek? Reading the Psukim, the exact quote in the Torah is, you shall remember what Hebrew or English?
English.
Right. So you shall remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you went out of Egypt, how he happened upon you on the way, and cut off the stragglers at your rear, when you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore, it will be, when the Lord your God grants you respite from all your enemies around you, in the land which the Lord your God gives to you as an inheritance to possess, you shall obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens. You shall not forget. Now, there seems to be very little wiggle room here. We shall never forget, never forgive. We must wipe them out. We must obliterate all traces of Amalek. But how can we justify that? How can we be okay with murdering an entire group of people? Now, I do understand it's very much connected to the Purim story, which is why I wrote this paper. Haman may have been from Amalek, and that if the first king of the Jewish people had dealt with the situation properly, like God had commanded, there would never have been an issue with Amalek in the future. However, even though Haman and other members of Amalek have brought upon the horrors onto the children of Israel, do they all deserve to die? Now, my question is, we have 13 attributes of mercy, and does God show none of them to Amalek? So I've read different commentaries, and I hope that what they have to say is right. That it's symbolic in some way that we are not expected to murder an entire race of people. However, according to some, like I was researching Chabad, and there seems to be very little wiggle room. The Torah meant what it said, and there's no misinterpretation. It's up to the people that have the stomach, according to Chabad, that some people might not be able to bring themselves to murder people. However, some people that are more devout will be able to. I just want to try to find an answer to this question. It really bothers me. I cannot fathom that God wants us to kill off an entire group of people. Hope the Rambam is right that his commandment to destroy the nation of Amalek requires the Jewish people to peacefully request that they accept upon themselves the Noachide laws and pay a tax to the Jewish kingdom. However, if they do refuse, then they must be physically killed, which still has that problem. Or perhaps there's another version that defeating Amalek is a spiritual ideal. that we have to forget about them and be able to move on. And that is the version I guess, accept more, understand more. However, any discussion that stems from this thought will be able to help a lot in my understanding of this strange mitzvah that we spend the entire Shabbos remembering.
Well, far be it from me to take away your anxiety. I think it's very important and your struggle. I think it's very important to have at least a couple of struggles that each person deals with within your relationship with Judaism going on at the same time. So if this is your one that you're facing now, I'm not going to offer you any explanation to take it away. The only thing that I'm going to offer, though, is to suggest that Judaism has a very different approach than, let's say, Christianity, which will turn the other cheek in the face of someone attacking them. And Judaism has understandings of acceptance and forgiveness and do not take revenge, etc., etc. And at the same time, there needs to be, when there is actual evil, real, tangible evil, it has to be dealt with forcefully and without mercy. So how you interpret that idea onto Amalek is another story, and I'm happy to talk about it in depth later, but I don't want to take away the struggle. So I'll just leave you with that thought.
Thank you. I understand. I've talked about it with my rabbi back home, and his thing was basically exactly what Chabad had said, where it's like, well, I don't think I'd be able to do it, but I'm sure there would be people that could.
So that doesn't help. That's not a helpful answer, because you're not asking with the practicality. I could also answer you that it doesn't apply today, right? We don't know who Amalek is, so it's impossible to know who they are, and therefore, we obviously can't fulfill this mitzvah in the old form because we don't know who they are, and once they're people have intermarried, then it's gone. So now we only have the remembrance of evil, and that's our job today, which is to remember evil and try to do our best to fight against it. Because there is actual evil, and we shouldn't waffle when we see evil, like, oh, I don't want to call that something. I don't want to call that evil. I don't want to call that wrong. Everybody has their own opinions of things, and Judaism does not hold by that approach of this moral relativism. When there is someone who commits an evil act, we have to call it evil, and we can't waffle on that and hiding behind moral relativism. So I think that lesson is still a valid one. However, that doesn't take away the fundamental issue of why the Torah at its time commanded us to commit genocide.
Yeah. The last thing, I don't want to take up any more time, but I had asked, well, let's say we were able to trace back. Let's say someone was really good at genealogy and keep going back, and you could
We don't hold by that. We don't hold by that.
So that would be a non-issue. Even if we could say that this person 100%.
Yes, you can come to me and say that you are Amalek, and I say I don't believe you. We're already posting that we do not believe anyone who claims to be Amalek.
Okay.
That nations have been mixed up.
Okay. So there's that.
The only way to fulfill the mitzvah is not by killing, but by remembering, and by holding on to this ideal that evil does exist, and it's our job to fight against it, without waffling and caving into moral relativism. Now we have to be very careful about what evil is, right? That has to be defined as well. I'm not saying that it's every individual can define it for themselves. And like, oh, I think this is evil. I think my next door neighbor is evil. So I'm going to go. That's not what I'm saying. Just because you think something is evil doesn't mean that you have a commandment to kill that person. Chas v'shalom, definitely not. But I think the idea behind Amalek is still very relevant.
Okay. Well, it helps a little bit. Actually, more than a little bit. It does help a lot. Okay,
there's a lot more to talk about that issue as well. I have thoughts on it as well. But let's keep rolling. It's already 9 o'clock. And it'd be nice if we can end close to on time. Who wants to go next?
I'd like to go next.
Angie, let's go.
Great. So one of the things that I do sometimes is serve as a birth doula for women during labor.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I've been doing that for a few years, and because of that, I was interested in exploring Jewish traditions and laws around pregnancy and birth. So I guess I'll start with what I found, or I'll share what I found. In my research, I discovered several customs practiced during pregnancy. I learned that some women take on the practice of giving charity every day, in addition to giving charity on Friday and holidays before lighting candles. I also learned that in some communities, there is the custom for the husband to open the ark before the Torah reading during the last month of pregnancy, because the Zohar says when the congregation takes out the Torah scroll, the heavenly gates of mercy are opened and God's love is aroused. So the husband opening the gates of heaven hopefully elicits God's blessing that the birth be easy and without complications. In some communities, it's customary for the pregnant woman to immerse in the mikveh sometime during the 9th month of pregnancy. I also learned that during pregnancy, a woman need not fast on any yearly fast days besides Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av. And also that there are guidelines for breaking the fast if the woman becomes sick or feels that she must eat on those days. For example, on Yom Kippur, if she feels she must eat or drink, she should eat less than an ounce of solid and drink less than a cheek full of liquid, wait 9 minutes, and then repeat as needed. Additionally, women are exempt from those yearly fast days except Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av for 2 years following the birth. There's also a belief that God knows the best time for the baby to be born and that induction of labor is not permitted except in cases of medical emergency or if the mother or child's lives are in jeopardy. If a woman believes that the birth is imminent, it's permitted to travel to the hospital or birthing center on Shabbat within certain guidelines. And it's also customary to hang up Psalm 121, Shir Hamalot, in the birthing room. And then in labor, a woman enters the ritual status of Nida with first signs of active labor. So from the first sign of blood or when she feels that delivery is imminent. And I didn't totally understand this piece, but I read in one source that the Nida status lasts for 7 days after the birth of a boy and 14 days following the birth of a girl. I learned that when hearing the news that one's wife gave birth, the father should say the blessing Hatov HaMeitiv. Blessed are you, the Lord, who is good and does good. And also, Birkat HaGomel is said following a safe delivery as a blessing of thanks for saving a person from potential danger. Following birth, for a boy, Brit Milah is planned on the 8th day following birth. And if the baby is the firstborn boy, a Pidyon HaBen should be planned on the 31st day, which is a ritual ceremony. And if the baby is a girl, the parents should arrange a feast and a naming celebrating her birth. And that's all.
Thank you. So the 7 and 14 that you are referring to?
Yeah.
So that's what the Torah talks about in terms of within the Torah system, but we actually, the rabbis sort of eliminated that whole thing and said that a woman is a nida until all the bleeding stops, which ends up dovetailing nicely with medical science because women are not allowed to have sex for 6 to 8 weeks after birth anyway, which is approximately when the blood will stop. So, there's no So not only is it permitted, is it forbidden under doctor's orders, but halacha it dovetails that very nicely.
So those 7 and 14 days are no longer relevant.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. that will actually come up in next week's parsha. So if you're interested in looking at that more, it goes 7 and 33 and 14 and 66, and those two numbers sort of go together. So if you look at that next week, it's the beginning of next week's Torah portion, where they talk about Parshat Tazria.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No, it was very timely to listen to it, God willing, for Rebecca and I.
Amen.
Who wants to go next?
I will go.
Go, Carrie.
Okay. Women's History Month is almost over, but that's no reason to stop celebrating those trailblazing women who came before us. Regardless of your vote or your preference for whose face appears on the dollar, there was at least one judge who was once more notorious than RBG. I'm talking, of course, of the prophet Devorah. Devorah died around 1067 BCE, more than 3,000 years ago, and only 200 years after the Jewish people settled in the land of Israel. At that time, the 12 Shvatim were largely living independently, but they were all suffering under the tyranny of the Canaanite king, Yabin, maybe, of Hazor, and his brutal general Sisera. Devorah lived in the hills of Ephraim and sat under a palm tree, speaking words of wisdom and encouragement to the people beleaguered by Yabin and Sisera, and settling disputes brought to her by the community members. This level of detail in Judges is actually kind of uncommon. It says that she sat under a palm tree, which has been interpreted just to mean that she sat and taught Torah outdoors, because a woman is not permitted to be alone in the house with a non-related man. But the palm tree has also been said to symbolize those that gathered under the tree with Devorah to learn Torah, because just like the palm tree has a heart, since all of its branches actually issue from one place, so too all those that gathered under the tree were there with the same heart, dedicated to the study of Torah and dedicated to learning with Hashem, before Hashem. And this distinguished them from their neighbors who worshipped idols and did other terrible things. In Judges 4:4, Devorah is identified as Eshet Lepidot, which might mean a woman of Lepidot, meaning like a place, a town. It could also mean the wife of Lapido. We are not entirely sure of her husband's name, but it could also mean Lapidot means torches, so a woman of torches, which I like best, as it could be like a fiery woman. We don't really know how she became a judge or why she's called a prophet, but we do know that she relayed to Barak Hashem's command to go and gather men and rise up against the general Sisera and his army of 10,000 with chariots of iron. For his part, Barak actually said no unless Devorah accompanied them into battle. And so she warned that if she was to do so, Barak, though he would find victory, all the glory would belong to a woman. And she went. Not surprisingly, the battle did not start off well for the Jews. But then it is said that the sun stood still and the moon halted. A sudden storm swept through and the army's chariots got stuck in the mud. Sisera's army, confused and terrified, were completely defeated. Sisera, unable to recover himself or his army, fled to a nearby house. That house was the home of Heber the Kenite, and his wife, Yael, showed Sisera hospitality, at least initially, offering him food and drink. From the exhaustion of battle, Sisera quickly fell asleep, and Yael saw this as a great opportunity, driving a tent nail through his temple while he slept. When Barak finally tracked Sisera to Heber's home, Yael led him to see the dead body of the general. And so it was Yael who gained the glory in the war. And after that victory, Devorah continued to lead the Jewish people in peace. That's it.
So we got a name in the running for your first girl. That's help.
Maybe. I don't. We're very Ashkenazi in my family tradition, and I don't have any family members named Devorah.
It's for your fourth girl when you have enough of them. And you
All right.
Yeah, no, that story has such female leadership, right? It's not only Devorah, but it's also Yael.
Indeed.
Very incredible. Okay, thank you. Who's up next?
I guess I'll go next. Should I get closer? I don't know. Can you all hear me? No?
Thumbs up. I saw some thumbs up.
Yes.
Sorry. All right. Jewish history, rituals, laws, and values unify an international Jewish community. My father's family comes from an Eastern European background, while my mother's family comes from a North African background, specifically from Morocco. Growing up, we went to an Ashkenazi shul. Later, my father and family became members of a Sephardic congregation. In this essay, I will explore the differences between the two. Ashkenazi Jews are broadly characterized as Jews coming from Central and Eastern Europe. Today, Ashkenazi Jews are the most populous ethnic group in North America. Yiddish comes from the Ashkenazi Jews who emerged in the Holy Roman Empire around the end of the first millennium. In the late Middle Ages, the Ashkenazi population shifted steadily from Germany to Eastern Europe. Immediately prior to the Holocaust, Ashkenazi Jews comprised 10 to 11 million of the 16 million Jews in the world. Sephardic Jews emerged in the Iberian Peninsula around the start of the second millennium in Spain and Portugal. A large majority of them migrated out of Spain due to the Alhambra decree in the late 15th century, which saw mass conversions and executions. Sephardic Jews then immigrated to Amsterdam, Northern Africa, and the Middle East. Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews have many different customs. Well-known differences in practices include the observance of Passover. Sephardic Jews eat legumes, grain, millet, and rice, while Ashkenazi Jews do not. Ashkenazi Jews mix fish and dairy, while some Sephardic Jews do not. Ashkenazim are more permissive towards the usage of wigs as hair covering for married and widowed women. Sephardic Jews have stricter requirements for the slaughter of animals to be eaten. Ashkenazi Jews traditionally name their firstborn after deceased relatives. Sephardic Jews traditionally name their children after the grandparents, whether they are dead or alive. Ashkenazi Jews wind their tefillin towards the body. Sephardic Jews wind away from the body. Ashkenazi men begin wearing a talit after their bar mitzvah or marriage. Sephardic Jews commonly wear them from early childhood. In my research, I found many articles showing a strong preference towards Sephardic Jews or Ashkenazi Jews, or vice versa. Some of the suggested Google searches included Ashkenazi versus Sephardic appearance, Ashkenazi disease, Ashkenazi versus Sephardic intelligence. Some of the articles I found were titled The Sephardic versus Ashkenazi Jews Distraction, Sephardim Not as Smart as Ashkenazim, Are Sephardim Black and Ashkenazim White? Ashkenazi parent wrote, Sephardi girls have a bad influence over our girls. I was and am surprised to find such articles, maybe from my own naivety. Both Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews have long, beautiful histories of Jewish practice. Both subcultures enrich the communities in which they live in and lived in. They have different, equally meaningful traditions within Judaism. My cousins from Canada used to laugh and ask, are you vuz-vuz or couscous? I'm proud to be both.
It's so nice that there's another Ashkenazi dad and a Sephardic mother product in the class.
Oh, okay.
I am too.
That's funny. I was thinking about it because my mom is one of 7, and she's the only one to marry not Sephardic. So I think next research would be how probably today more than before there's kind of a mix.
Yeah, totally. That's a good thing. Thank God. Well, thank you. Any more? Who's up next?
I can go next, but I'm not sure if I did this paper already or not. I think I did not.
I don't even know what that means. Like you sort of have like stored papers that you keep going.
No, we had we had a paper class, like the previous paper class, and I prepared a paper, but I never got to actually read it. So I had it.
Okay, well, this is your chance then. Let's hear it.
Okay, it's about making coffee on Shabbat. I didn't do that, right? I didn't read that.
I don't think so.
Okay, good. Obviously, a lighter topic. Okay, so it's about, is it okay to make coffee on Shabbat? So I like good coffee, and I decided to investigate whether making coffee on Shabbat is kosher. You know, sometimes when I go to Chabad, I actually noticed that some people on Shabbat take a cup and fill it up with hot water from the urn, and then they actually add instant coffee on top, and they don't use a spoon and don't stir. And I didn't really understand why they're doing that. So this was a little interesting topic. So basically, some of these restrictions related to the 39 melachot, or actions, or types of work, including food preparation and cooking, which are not allowed on Shabbat. Boiling anything is not allowed on Shabbat. Grinding is not allowed. And of course, you cannot use electrical appliances on Shabbat. And there's also rules about mixing and creating foods. So back to coffee. I like my coffee fresh, so I buy whole beans and I grind them right before I make the coffee. So obviously I cannot do that on Shabbat. It's forbidden. You cannot use the grinder. But it's okay because you can grind them ahead of time. But there's bigger issues. For example, if you're using like an AeroPress or French press, then there's rule around borer, which is sorting food, and around bishul, which is cooking food. And basically, you're not allowed to do borer or bishul. You're not allowed to sort or cook on Shabbat. So borer basically means that you need to, borer is allowed. And borer allows you to sort, meaning take something that's desired, the product, in this case is the coffee that you made, out of the undesired, which is the ground coffee. So using like a French press, you're basically pouring out the good coffee and leave behind the bad stuff that you don't need, which is okay. But if you're doing filter coffee, it's actually the opposite, and it may not be really kosher. So that's debatable. Cooking is another reason. First of all, you're not allowed to boil water on Shabbat, obviously. So you have to use the automatic water heater, like the urn, and you start it before Shabbat, and then that's fine. And then when you mix the coffee with the water, you're basically potentially cooking the coffee. So the way to go around that is there's a rule that says there is no cooking after something is already cooked. So you're not really cooking if the coffee has been cooked already, meaning roasted. So that's fine. However, it is considered cooking if something was baked first. And when you roast something, it's more baking than cooking. So that's really not potentially allowed. So that's an interesting point that is debatable. Let me see. Okay. So the other thing is that there's a rule called Kli Sheni. And basically, if you're using water that's boiled and you move it from the urn into a cup and then from a cup to another cup and then you put it into the cup with the coffee, or you add the coffee afterwards, then basically you move it between vessels and then it's not considered cooking and then you're good to go. Also, if you're using instant coffee, you can add it after you pour the water into the cup and then you should be good. just don't stir. And there's a bunch of other rules around that and all kinds of nuances. But I think that the bottom line is that if you make coffee, you should use the urn, automatic heater, and if you add the coffee after you put the water, and you don't stir, then you're definitely fine. At least these are the rules according to what I was able to find. So that's it.
Yasher Koach, that's a very comprehensive and that's very detailed for Shabbat. Beautiful, beautiful. If I can add a couple of things to that conversation, I'm not a coffee drinker, so probably Rebecca's the better person to talk to if you're interested. But I don't see why you can't stir. So I don't know why there's no stirring. So I think you can stir. I don't hear what the argument would be around not stirring. But yeah, so if you're using instant coffee, so that's already been cooked before.
Okay.
And dehydrated, so there's no problem with instant coffee. But with the other coffee, it becomes much more problematic. French presses would still be considered borer potentially. It gets complicated because you're using a kli with it, right? Because there are 3 elements for borer that get you out of borer, which is separating. And all these qualifications have to apply. One is you're doing it for immediate use. One is you're taking the good from the bad. You're not taking the bad from the good. You're taking the good from the bad. And the third one is you're doing it by hand and not by kli, not by utensil. So that third one you lose out on for the French press. So generally people have instant coffee on Shabbos. And they use the hot water, and that's sort of what that, yeah. What can you do? Listen, it's
Rabbi Applebaum.
being a Jew, right?
I thought that you can't stir because that equals cooking. Like if you have a chillent on a blech, you can't stir it, right?
Why? But it's not cooking. So yeah, you can't exactly. Emily, you're right. If you have a chillent on the blech, or you have anything on the blech, you can't stir on the blech, 100%, because then you could be cooking there. But this is in a cup off the blech with something that's already been cooked before. You're not on the fire anymore. You're in a cup. So
as long as you take it off the blech, so if you take something off the blech, then you can stir it.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, no, that's more complicated. I don't want to say yes to that question. But
okay.
In this case, though, it's not cooking because this thing is cooked already. You're saying that is also.
But cholent is cooked already.
Cholent is cooked already, but it's not. But you've already taken it out of the. Here, let me rephrase it. If you put cholent on your plate, are you telling me you can't stir it around and mix it up? Of course you can do that, right?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yeah, no, I agree. I just was confused as to why that's complicated.
Once you take it off the source of heat, once you take it out of its original container that it's in, so either off of the blech or out of the urn and into something else like a plate or a cup that's not heat generated, wasn't even on the blech, then I don't see why you can't stir. I have to consult my Chabad friends to find out why they don't stir. I think it's strange. Okay, let's go. We have 5 minutes to squeeze a few in. So who do we have? Damien. We have Ben. We have Yoko, right? And Shayna, right? Who wants to go next? Okay, Damien.
So I wrote observing the lunar calendar. So when looking at the sky on a clear night, the moon can always be observed to determine time. There's a visual way to understand days to months to years. Before a solar calendar, this lunar method provided a map of observation to get a beginning and end of a cycle. On Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month, messengers would be sent out to declare a new month began. This would be decided by watching the night sky after the sun sets. A sliver of the moon appears when the month begins, and it can be seen as long as it is a clear night. The Sanhedrin Sanhedrin,
that which Dan was referring
which Dan was talking about earlier, or a council appointed in the land of Israel, would be notified this was the first day of the month observing the moon. The messengers would be sent out to declare the day. During this understanding, a time to begin a new year was based on spring. This also factored in crops and livestock. It included Jewish holidays that fall in the year for continuity and ritual for those holidays. It is almost a living organism of change to adapt to each year. There are three factors to determine the lunar calendar. One is the Earth spinning on its axis. The second is the moon's orbit, the moon orbiting the Earth. The third is the Earth orbiting the sun. In each of the Jewish lunar calendar, in each year of the Jewish lunar calendar, there will be 12 to 13 months. The reason for the distinction of 12 to 13 months is because there are fractional days, for the moon to revolve around the Earth for each lunar cycle. About every 29.5 days, the moon revolves around the Earth. The Earth takes about 365.5 days to revolve around the sun. To make each cycle work, to establish time in the Jewish lunar calendar, months are either 29 or 30 days. Years are either 12 or 13 months. This sets the foundation. The cycle of the seasons in relation to what is understood as a year is the reason to find the right time to plant seeds, tend to livestock, or simply find shelter against the elements. In this distant past, a month would be added before Adar if spring-like conditions were not present. Time and calendars have changed since, but the beginning of this calculation is dated at 5758 to represent the beginning of Judaism. In the 4th century, Hillel II held office as one of the ancient Sanhedrin. I think I'm butchering it, but between 320 and 385 CE. At this determination of his time, Hillel II is acknowledged as the creator of the standardized lunar calendar. He created a 19-year cycle for the lunar calendar that is accepted today. The mathematical answer states an annual coherent 19-year cycle for the years considering the lunar cycle. Every 3rd, 6th, 8th, 11th, 14th, 17th, and 19th year of Adar will add a second month of Adar to the year. When the second month of Adar is added, it will fall before the proper month of Adar to celebrate. To celebrate Purim, Yatzitz, or Bar Mitzvahs, this would
Yortzites.
Yortzites.
Yeah.
Yortzites. This will always be recognized on the second or proper month of Adar. The added month of Adar is called Adar Rishon, first Adar, or Adar Aleph, meaning the numeral 1. To get more granular, since the day is added to the months of Shezvan, a single day is added to. To get more granular, a single day is added to the month of Shezvan or Kislev. This is determined by the time of the day the full moon of the following year is in Tishrei. Also, the day of the week Tishrei would occur. Tishrei is the first month of the civil year. This would allow the days between Nisan and Tishrei to follow the same corresponding. Also, it would allow Passover and Sukkot to follow the same. This leads to following ritual during the year. To observe the lunar calendar takes vigilance in its pure definition. To accept this measurement of time asks one to look, so as we look we can find the world cycles. As individually we find observance, we find connection with what exists.
Thank you. Wow. Quite detailed into the year. Awesome. If anyone has any questions about the year, I think we now know who to turn to. Thank you, Damien. Okay, who's up next? It's 9:30, but I'm reluctant to let you go too quickly because Pesach is coming, and we have a lot of questions. Did anyone else get the Pesach unit?
When did you? Could you resend it possibly?
Yeah, because it seems like a lot of people didn't get it. Okay, I gotta send it. But since there are a lot of questions, and I want to make sure we must get through that unit quickly, and also since Rebecca's due date, I think, is on Sunday, and Rebecca has historically given birth 2 to 4 days after her due date. For the other kids, I'm nervous about Wednesday's class. So in light of that, I want to make sure we can dedicate all the class time that we do have to the PACEF unit. So let's push on a little bit more. We only have a couple more essays to read and to listen to. So let's see if we can, we'll cap it at like, we will not go past 9:43. Does that work for y'all?
That's good.
Yes. That's good.
Okay, so who's up next? Someone take the reins. Oh, now we're just wasting time. Shayna or Ben or Yoko, are you guys prepared to read, or should we come back to you another week?
Yoko says she needs to come back another week.
Okay, no problem. Ben or Shayna, do you guys want another week, or?
Ben's not here, if you're talking about my Ben.
Yes, your Ben. Ben's not there. Okay, then we would be waiting a long time for that. Okay, Shayna, is Shayna here?
I need a little more time.
Okay, so we will return to all of you another week. Everyone else has been covered. Well, I guess we can end on time. I wish you all a good evening.
So did you send out the Pesach unit?
I thought that I did, but apparently I didn't.
Yeah,
So
we don't have it either.
Yeah, I'm looking through Yoko's email and I don't see it.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you all brought it to my attention, because that would make next week's class very challenging. Okay, stand by to receive the class. To receive the next class, next unit. But I bid you farewell.
Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Great job.
Right.
So much fun. Isn't this class so much fun? This is like the best class of the year. You learn so many things about.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's such a.
Zeigesund.
Zeigesund.
Zeigesund. Geschlufen.
Yeah. Okay, take care, everybody. I will send out this email now.
Can you add the cashier to that?
Yeah, I can send the cashier one also. I have to send them individually, but I can do that. Okay, tell me when you get it. Thank you.
The coffee's fine, instant.
Instant coffee's fine.
Doesn't change it from one state to another?
So it's not considered cooking because it's just really mixing.
As long as you don't boil the water.
So you have to boil the water in an urn. Mm-hmm. It's not on the stove. You pre-boil the water in an urn. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean by urn, right?
Yeah, something that.
Yeah, hot water heater. Yeah. Because yeah, a bunch of people like urn. Urn? You mean like where we put our dead, cremated whatever? That's how I'm talking about. So yeah, the hot water heater. So you get one of those for Shabbat.
Nice coffee is fine.
Yep. Those you can make in advance for sure. But yeah, you can just mix instant. Pour yourself a cup, mix instant. It's already pre-cooked. So.
Yep. All right.
We don't drink coffee or smoke pot, so we're out of those two
that's funny. Okay, guys, I'll see you later.
Yep.
Thanks for coming over.
Thank you for having us.
Somebody, listen, it wasn't all alone for this class.
Well, we are the closest, right?
Yeah, but still. Did you enjoy the class?
Yeah, it was good. I learned a lot. I mean, a lot of different subjects, a lot of different points of interest.
Yeah, and that's what also, because you got a sense of like the different personalities in the class.
Yeah.
Like it comes out much more in these when you give people a chance to speak for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Straight. That's
You write about something important to you or interesting.
Yeah.
It's cool when one touches on another too. Like there are like moments.
Right.
And that's fun.
Yeah.
And you like see
Like the
how-
Sanhedrin connection, or like there's a Hamadasha.
As I was saying, how do I say it? I still don't know if I got it.
Sanhedrin.
Sanhedrin?
Sanhedrin.
Because I
Or
assumed-
Sanhedrin.
That's what I thought.
Sanhedrin. It's depending if you're saying it in Ashkenazi or Sephardic.
My mom and my brother met me for lunch today, and I was telling them like, it's really weird for me. My parents are Israeli. My mom's family moved to Israel, but so my parents speak Hebrew at home, and it's really like, it's not weird, but it's different to hear everything within Ashkenazi accent, even though like I went to like.
What do you mean everything?
Like.
Or like Torah reading, for example?
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, that's because I'm doing all those things. Anything that comes out of my mouth is going to sound Ashkenazis.
Even
So-
like, I feel like in one of the first classes we were in online, you'd like correct someone with the Ashkenazi accent. And it's funny because I went to Solomon chapter, so that's how they taught. So
Right.
it shouldn't sound so bizarre to me, but like to my ear, I'm always like,
No, hold on to it. Listen, if that's, that's your custom. And, that's how my mother's family does it too.
That's a funny thing.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
thank you.
Thanks.
My paper was all right.
It was great, very well researched, and it was important to you, and that's what's most important. Good job, guys.
Should I like this one?
No, keep it as it is. Thank you. Israel. Say it again. In terms of speed, I think. Do you want to do it at your house? You're saying? Yeah, no. I feel like it's just a little faster. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, sounds good. See you in a minute. This is awesome. Is it still open?